Back then, before smartphones and calendar reminders, before we scheduled our joy, the ice cream truck was its own kind of clock. You didn't need to know the time. You just had to listen. That familiar jingle, some cheerful little tune, a bit too loud, a bit too scratchy, would float down the street like a promise. It was never early, never late. It came exactly when it was supposed to, not by the hour, but by the heat. It showed up on the kind of afternoons where the sun pressed against your skin like a warm hand, and the pavement shimmered with that mirage haze that made you wonder if your eyes were playing tricks. We didn't need a weatherman to tell us it was summer. The first ice cream truck of the season was the real announcement. Winter had left. School was almost out, and we tanned barefoot scab-kneed kids with sticky fingers and wild energy were ready for the chase. Because you didn't just wait for the truck, you hunted it. That first note of the jingle sent kids flying out of garages, bursting through screen doors, leaping off bikes like stuntmen. Money was clutched in sweaty palms, crumpled quarters and dimes from couch cushions and the bottom of Mom's purse. Sometimes even a dollar bill if you were feeling lucky, or if Grandma had visited recently. And then came the dash. You ran toward the sound like it was calling your name, past sprinklers, through backyards, hopping over fences if necessary. You didn't walk to the ice cream truck. You ran. It was a ritual, a game, a test of speed and timing. And even if you didn't have enough change, you ran anyway, because sometimes just being there was enough. Maybe a friend would spot you. Maybe the guy in the truck, the man who somehow remembered your name and always wore the same blue cap, would toss in a little extra just this once, that jingle. It still lives somewhere in the back of my mind, faint but permanent, like the scent of sunblock or the feel of a popsicle stick between your teeth. It was always the same tune. Some trucks played The Entertainer, others Do Your Ears Hang Low, or maybe it was just a looped melody you never learned the name of. But the moment you heard it, it was like someone hit a switch. The day suddenly became important, and the whole neighborhood held its breath. Funny how a melody can carry more memory than a photo. That music didn't just mean ice cream. It meant summer. It meant freedom. It meant someone out there, someone in a white truck, filled with sugar and cold, was thinking of you. Or at least that's how it felt. And for a kid, feelings were facts. Sometimes you didn't even care what you'd buy. Sometimes you stood in front of that colorful, sticker-covered truck and stared at the choices like you were solving a riddle. Fudgesicles, rocket pops, drumsticks, push-ups, in the little cardboard tube that always tore at the wrong moment. The menu was a masterpiece of temptation, and the photos on the side of the truck, slightly sun-bleached, peeling at the corners, still managed to look better than anything you'd ever tasted. But in that moment, standing in the hot sun with your bare feet on warm concrete, and the coins in your hand already melting into your palm, it didn't matter if the ice cream was fancy, or if it melted too fast. It was yours. You'd earned it. With your ears, your legs, and your timing. The ice cream truck didn't hand out desserts. It handed out victories. And when you finally walked back slowly, now licking as you went, you were a little more powerful than you'd been just minutes before. Sticky, sure. Probably a bit sunburned. Maybe already plotting tomorrow's chase. But satisfied, fully and completely. Because once again the truck had come. Exactly when it was supposed to. There was this moment, right after the first jingle hit the air before your feet even moved. when you'd lock eyes with the kid across the street, or your cousin sitting next to you on the porch, or your little brother halfway up the tree, and without saying anything, you just knew. The chase was on. No plan, no speech, no need for words. Just the sudden synchronized launch of 3, maybe 4 kids, bolting in unison like sprinters at the starting gun. That's the kind of magic the ice cream truck brought with it. A silent signal, a shared instinct, like migrating birds who just know which way to fly. We didn't organize, we didn't coordinate, we just moved, like heat rising off pavement, like water running downhill. You didn't have to ask your parents if it was okay, you just ran. And chances were they already knew. They'd heard it, too. Maybe Dad was in the garage, wrench in hand, and he'd pause, smirk, and yell, "Better hurry, they're not waiting forever." Maybe Mom would toss a few quarters down from the open kitchen window, shouting, "Bring back my change," though she knew she wouldn't see a penny. And maybe someone's grandmother would be sitting on the porch with a glass of lemonade, smiling that quiet, knowing smile that meant she remembered running for the truck. 2 decades ago, maybe in another city, maybe even to a cart with a bell instead of a jingle. It didn't matter if you were close friends, or if you'd barely spoken all summer. The ice cream truck made everyone neighbors again. Suddenly the kid who always hogged the basketball was standing beside you, choosing a rocket pop, like it was a sacred decision. The shy girl from 2 houses down who never came to birthday parties was right there, smiling under her bangs, trying to decide between a bomb pop and one of those chocolate tacos that melted too fast but tasted like heaven. And for those 10, maybe 15 minutes, everyone stood under the same sun, equal parts, customer kid and comrade. There wasn't a lot of small talk. No one said, "Hi, how are you?" or "What have you been up to?" That wasn't how it worked. You didn't catch up. You didn't chit-chat. You stood. You waited. You listened to the ice cream man hum to himself as he scooped, peeled, popped lids, counted change. Every now and then a kid would announce what they wanted, with the kind of confidence you only find in childhood. 2 fudgesicles and a choco taco, please, and then step aside like a hero. But mostly we just understood each other. The waiting wasn't boring. It was shared. It was ours. And let's talk about that line. That ragtag, messy little line of kids, shirtless boys, ponytailed girls, some barefoot, some with grass-stained socks, squinting up at the truck, like it was a spaceship sent from a kinder planet. No one told you where to stand. There were no ropes, no numbered tickets. You figured it out. The littlest kids went first, usually nudged ahead by their older siblings. There was always one bossy kid who tried to cut, and always another who'd shout, "Hey, back of the line," and justice would somehow restore itself without a single grown-up stepping in. It was a different kind of order, not the kind written down, the kind felt. You didn't need rules when everyone wanted the same thing, and no one wanted to mess it up. The truck came, the line formed, and for once in our chaotic little lives, we all waited. Patiently. Kind of. And if someone dropped a coin and it rolled under the truck, 3 other kids would get down on their hands and knees to help find it. Because when the truck was there, we were all on the same team. Sometimes there'd be music playing from a nearby radio. Maybe some Elvis, maybe the Temptations, depending on whose house was closest. The songs blended with the jingle, with the sound of cicadas in the trees, with lawnmowers buzzing and distant dogs barking. It was noise, yes, but it was the right kind of noise. the kind that made you feel like the world was full alive, humming along just fine. And when the last kid finally got their treat, when the engine hummed to life, and the truck pulled away with a slow wave from the driver, whose name you never knew, but somehow trusted the crowd would slowly dissolve, like mist, like the end of a song. One by one, kids wandered off, some walking home, others back to their bikes or stoops. The silence that followed wasn't sad. It was soft, like the final note of a lullaby. No one ever said, "See you tomorrow." You didn't have to. You knew the truck would be back, and when it came, you'd hear it before you saw it, and you'd run again. By the time you reached the front of the line, hot, breathless, maybe with a coin or two that had fallen into the grass and picked up a bit of dirt, you didn't need to look at the menu. You already knew. Every kid on the block had memorized that truck's side panel like it was scripture. Each sticker, each sun-faded rectangle of glossy peeling plastic was more familiar than a homework assignment, more studied than the back of your cereal box. And even when the pictures were worn and warped by too many summers, you could still point to each one and name it like a friend. There was the red, white, and blue rocket pop, tall and proud like the 4th of July in frozen form. It tasted more like food coloring than fruit, but that didn't matter. It melted down your arm just the same. There was the drumstick, the king of all cones, its swirl of vanilla ice cream topped with a hard chocolate shell, and that sacred final bite at the bottom of the cone, where the chocolate had pooled like buried treasure. And the fudgesicle, smooth cold, somehow still creamy, even when it began to melt and left your fingers sticky and brown. That was a classic, unquestionable, the kind of treat your dad might buy for himself when he thought no one was looking. Then there were the show-offs, the character bars. Remember those? The Ninja Turtles, with gumball eyes, or Bugs Bunny, with a smile that never quite looked right. They were always a little off, a little lopsided, like someone had described the character to a sculptor from memory. One eye up, one down, mouth askew, but still somehow perfect, because for a few minutes you weren't just a kid on a sidewalk. You were a kid eating Spider-Man's face, and what more could you ask for? Some kids were loyal. They got the same thing every single time. Push-up, they'd declare, slamming their coins into the man's hand with absolute certainty. That bright orange cardboard tube with Fred Flintstone on the front, a sticky mess from the second you peeled the plastic seal. You had to eat it fast before it slumped sideways and slid into your lap. But the flavor, that artificial orange cream, was a taste you never forgot. Others were adventurous. They tried something new each week, working their way through the menu like explorers, charting an undiscovered land. "What's that one?" they'd ask, pointing to the snow cone, layered in impossible colors. "It's rainbow," the man would say, as if that explained anything. And somehow it did. Of course not everything was a hit. There was always that one item someone thought they liked, the banana popsicle maybe, or the root beer float on a stick, and they'd get halfway through it before realizing they'd made a terrible mistake. That's when the deals started. "I'll trade you my banana for half your rocket." "No way. Come on, I'll throw in a gumball." Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the banana ended up in the grass. But either way, the lesson was learned. Choose wisely, or prepare to barter, like you were on the playground stock exchange. And the prices, can we talk about the prices? A quarter could get you something decent. 2 quarters, and you were living large. $1. That was luxury. That was name brand, chocolate dipped, maybe even nuts on top territory. You never carried more than you needed, but you always checked your pocket before heading out to play, just in case. Some days the money wasn't there. Maybe you'd spent it on baseball cards, or maybe your little brother had borrowed it, and so you'd linger near the truck, hopeful, kicking at the gravel, waiting for a miracle. Sometimes the miracle came. A neighbor handed you a coin. A friend said, "It's okay, I'll cover you." And just like that, summer felt a little kinder. 'Cause it wasn't really about the flavor. Not deep down. It wasn't even about the sugar, though that helped. It was about belonging. About standing there, ice cream in hand, knowing you were part of something. A little ritual, a shared rhythm. The adults had their barbecues and bridge nights and drive-ins. We had the ice cream truck, and that menu stuck to the side of the van with fading tape, and smudged fingerprints was our declaration of independence. Years later, when someone mentions those treats in passing, you can still taste them. Not just the flavor, but the moment. The heat of the pavement under your feet. The music far off, then suddenly right there. The way the paper wrapper stuck to the ice cream and you peeled it off with your teeth. The feeling of holding something cold in the middle of a hot day. Something that wouldn't last, but that was okay. Because that was the point. You had to enjoy it now before it melted. And isn't that just childhood in a nutshell? It's strange how those tastes stick with you. How even now, decades later, walking past the frozen aisle in a grocery store, you might spot a familiar logo, a faded orange push-up, a fudgesicle box, and feel that tiny tug in your chest, a pull toward a version of yourself you haven't seen in years, barefoot, sunburned, smiling, holding 2 sticky quarters in one hand and a rainbow snow cone in the other. And just like that, you remember you didn't need to read the menu. You already knew every flavor by heart. We never knew his name. Not really. Some people called him Mr. Joe. Others said it was Larry, and a few swore he was just the ice cream man. But to us, he didn't need a real name. He was him, the guy, the one behind the little sliding window in that sun-bleached white truck, handing out happiness with one hand and taking sticky quarters with the other. And in our eyes, he was nothing short of a legend. He always wore the same thing, a collared shirt that might have once been white, but had seen too many summers to tell, and a cap navy blue curved brim pulled low over his eyes. His skin was weathered like leather left in the sun too long, and his hands were the kind that looked like they'd done more than just hand out popsicles. Strong, steady, capable. You could tell he'd lived a life before this truck, but we never asked, and he never offered. He was quiet, but not cold, polite, but not chatty. The kind of man who let the kids talk first, who remembered what you got last time, and who never rushed you even when the line was long and the sun was unforgiving. There was a kind of respect between us, unspoken but solid. You didn't push or yell or act up when you were near the truck, not because he would scold you, but because you just didn't. His presence alone smoothed out the rough edges. Kids who were wild minutes before would go still when they reached the window, suddenly polite, suddenly aware that they were dealing with someone who mattered. And he did, because he showed up. Every single day like clockwork. Rain or shine, as long as it was warm enough for shorts and sandals, he'd come rolling down the street with that familiar song leading the way. And he never seemed tired, never seemed bored, even though we knew deep down that he must have been both. but he never showed it. Never sighed when we couldn't decide. Never snapped when we dropped our change or changed our minds. He had the patience of saints, or maybe just a deep understanding that to us this moment wasn't small. Sometimes late in the season when school had started and the days were cooling off, he'd give out extras. A second popsicle for the kid who brought their little sister. A discount for the one who lost a tooth that week. He didn't announce it, didn't make a show. He'd just nod, reach into the cold box, and slide an extra treat across the counter like it was no big deal. But it was. It always was. There were rumors about him, of course. Neighborhood stories that floated around like smoke from a backyard grill. Some said he used to be in the army. Others claimed he once drove trucks across the country, hauling goods coast to coast, before settling down in a small town with a freezer full of sweets. A few kids swore he lived in the truck, had a bed in the back, and everything. No one really knew, and in a strange way, no one wanted to. Because mystery made him bigger. He wasn't just a guy with a job. He was part of summer itself. A fixture, as essential as the sun, the sprinklers, the smell of cut grass. Every once in a while, someone would try to talk to him, ask him where he got his treats, or how he kept them cold. He'd smile, maybe chuckle, say something like trade secret, and go right back to work. He didn't overshare, didn't post pictures or have a business card, but somehow every parent in the neighborhood knew him too. You'd hear your mom say he's a good man, or your dad mutter glad he's still doing this, and that was all it took. Their trust was our confirmation, and the way he treated us, it stuck. He didn't see us as just noisy kids with dirty hands and loud voices. He saw us as people, small sure, young definitely, but people nonetheless, deserving of kindness, of patience, of the little moments that made a big life. One summer he didn't show up for a few days. At first we thought maybe the truck broke down, then someone said he was sick. A week passed, 2. The air felt strange without that jingle. The afternoons felt longer, heavier. Then one day he was back. No announcement, no explanation. Just the truck rolling down the block tune playing, and there he was behind the window as if no time had passed at all. But that day the line was quieter. The thank yous were louder. We didn't say it, but we all felt it. Relief, gratitude, like something we hadn't realized we missed had returned. And as the years went on, the faces changed. Kids grew up, moved away, got too cool for popsicles. But he stayed, for a while anyway. Long enough that some of us got to bring our own kids to the truck point, to the man in the cap, and say, I used to come here when I was your age. And he'd nod, maybe even remember, maybe not. But it didn't matter, because the ice cream truck wasn't about memory. It was memory. Eventually the truck stopped coming. No big announcement. Just one summer it didn't return. And though we knew deep down that time moves on, that people retire, that trucks wear out, that even legends rest, we still listened. That first hot day of June, when the sidewalk warmed and the air shimmered, we listened, just in case. And sometimes, even now, when the wind is just right, and the world is quiet enough you can almost hear it, that old jingle, and you remember him, the man in the truck, the one who showed up, the one who made childhood taste like summer. It's funny looking back how little we really had, not just in our pockets, but in general. Our homes weren't big. Most had one bathroom, maybe 2 if your dad had built an extra one in the basement. Our clothes were hand-me-downs more often than not. You learned early how to patch up a pair of jeans or stretch a pair of sneakers one more summer. Vacations were rare, and when they happened, they weren't flights or cruises. They were road trips, long sticky rides in the back of the station wagon to visit cousins or campgrounds, or roadside motels with broken vending machines and tiny pools. But we didn't notice what we lacked. Not really. Because somehow in that simple life we had enough. We had bikes with one gear and banana seats. We had a rope swing tied to a tree down near the creek. We had neighborhood games that went on for hours. Kick the can, capture the flag red rover, and the kind of rules that changed depending on who was losing. We had freedom. We had scraped knees and wild hair, and sunburns that peeled in sheets, and we had the kind of laughter that didn't need electricity to stay lit. And we had the ice cream truck. It wasn't gourmet. No small batch, no organic, no exotic ingredients. It was sugar and cold, wrapped in wax paper, and hope. And that was enough. Because when you came running with your last 50 cents, and he handed you that slowly melting orange push-up, or a fudge-sickle that stuck to its wrapper, you didn't think about what you didn't have. You thought about what you did, a treat in your hand, a song in the air, the sun on your shoulders and the taste of summer on your tongue. We didn't know the difference between wealth and riches back then. If someone's dad had a nicer car, maybe you noticed. If someone's mom packed fruit snacks in their lunch, maybe you were jealous. But when the truck came, none of that mattered. No one cared what your house looked like or whether your bike had a bell. The only thing that mattered was whether you had enough change, and if you didn't, well, someone usually helped. The older kids would pool their coins. The driver might give you a discount, and sometimes just being there, showing up with empty hands but bright eyes, was enough. There was something sacred about that kind of shared joy. It didn't come from money. It came from presence, from being part of something that didn't cost much but felt like everything. The truck came, and for 15 golden minutes the whole block paused. Moms leaned against door frames, dads peeked over newspapers, babies bounced on hips, and kids wild and barefoot formed a messy little crowd at the curb. You didn't need more than that. You didn't need screens or subscriptions or deluxe anything. You needed the truck, the tune, the taste. It taught us things, that ritual. It taught us patience waiting our turn, even when we were melting right along with the popsicles. It taught us choice, staring down the menu, weighing your options, knowing you only had enough for one. It taught us generosity, sharing a bite, offering a lick, holding someone's wrapper when they needed both hands. It taught us how to be happy with just enough, how to feel full from a 0.75 treat and a sun-warmed sidewalk. And it reminded us every time that delight doesn't need to be extravagant to be real. Sometimes I think about the things we used to call treats. A frozen chocolate taco, a grape-flavored snow cone in a paper cone that always collapsed by the time you were halfway done, a gumball that turned your whole mouth blue. They wouldn't win awards today. Some of them wouldn't even pass a health inspection. But we didn't care, because what we were really tasting wasn't the product, it was the moment, the context, the chase, the jingle, the sun in our hair and the truck just around the corner. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough to laugh, enough to play, enough to make memories that somehow 5 decades later still feel warm to the touch. And when I think of that now, I realize something simple, having a lot, doesn't always mean you've lived a lot. But feeling full of sun and sugar and stories, that's the stuff that lasts. The world is different now. Kids have more. They know more. They carry entire libraries in their pockets, video games in their backpacks, and that's fine. Progress is fine. But part of me wonders if they'll ever know the joy of hearing that off-key tune on a too hot afternoon and dropping everything just to chase it. If they'll ever know the thrill of holding something cold in one hand and someone else's laughter in the other. If they'll ever look back and say we didn't have much, but that didn't matter. Because we had the truck, we had each other, and somehow that was everything. There was a rhythm to those summer days, not the kind you could see on a calendar or punch into a clock, but the kind your body just knew. You woke up when the light hit a certain way through your bedroom curtain. You ate when the screen door slammed and someone shouted your name. You went inside when the mosquitoes came out and the porch light flickered on. And somewhere in between all of that was the ice cream truck. Not by appointment, not by rule, but by instinct. You just knew when it was time. You'd be mid-game, halfway through a round of freeze tag, or stretched across a lawn chair drawing comic books in the sun. And suddenly, there it was. Not even the full melody at first. Just a note, a snippet, a piece of sound drifting in like a breeze. You'd lift your head, squint into the heat, and wait. Was that it? Or were you imagining it? Then you'd hear it again clearer, now louder, and that was all it took. Time stopped, or rather it snapped into focus. You didn't have a phone in your pocket, and even if you had, you wouldn't have checked it. The jingle was the clock, the signal, the appointment bell. It meant it was exactly the right time for one thing to run, and you did. Without a second thought, barefoot, with gravel under your tholes and screen door still swinging behind you, you bolted toward the sound like it was calling your name. And in a way, it was. That music wasn't just a melody. It was a map. It told you exactly where the truck was, even before you saw it. The rise and fall of the tune echoed through the streets like sonar. You knew if it was coming up the hill turning past Johnson's house, or already rolling down Maple Drive by the way the sound bounced and bent. You adjusted accordingly. If you were smart, you took a shortcut through the Penningtons' backyard, jumped the fence, ducked under the clothesline, didn't stop to apologize. You had seconds, maybe minutes, and the window was narrow. That truck wouldn't wait. But that was part of the fun, the urgency, the sense that you had to earn it not with money, but with speed, with awareness, with timing. If you were too late, it was gone, and you'd spend the rest of the day playing it over in your head. The missed chance, the silent street, the empty curb. You might even try to chase it down, hearing it fade in the distance, heart pounding and feet flying, knowing it was hopeless but chasing anyway, just in case. And when you did time it right, when you burst around the corner, just as the truck pulled up, with a gentle squeal of brakes, and the music hit its peak. That feeling was electric, like you'd done something heroic. You had arrived right on time, not because a clock told you, but because you felt it, deep in your bones. You didn't need a watch. You didn't need a parent yelling from the porch. The truck told you everything you needed to know about where you were in the day. It became a kind of anchor. You built your afternoons around it. Let's finish this game before the truck comes. We'll go home after the ice cream. Even the grown-ups caught on. You'd hear someone say, "Better start dinner, the truck just passed," like it was the church bell in the town square. And in a way it was. The whole block moved to its music, and because it came at the same time most days, give or take a few minutes, you began to anticipate it. You'd sit on the porch, steps coins in hand, long before the first note, listening, waiting, imagining the menu, planning your order. Would it be the same as yesterday? Or would you finally try that weird chocolate and peanut thing your cousin swore was amazing? The anticipation was a kind of sweetness all its own. Some days it was even better than the treat itself. There was a kind of stillness in that wait, too. The kind you rarely feel anymore. You'd sit still, ears tuned, body ready, but nothing frantic. Just presence. Just being there. The hum of cicadas, the hiss of a sprinkler, maybe a fly buzzing near your lemonade glass. And then when the truck came into view, the world sped up again just for a moment. But it started in that stillness. And when it came, it never felt ordinary. No matter how many times you heard it, no matter how many treats you'd already had that summer, the moment that jingle turned the corner, everything in you lit up. Not because you were hungry, not even because you wanted sugar, but because the truck meant something. It meant the world still worked, that the pattern still held, that you were still a kid, still barefoot, still exactly where you were supposed to be. And isn't that a kind of magic? In a world that's now ruled by alerts and alarms and precise digital schedules, I sometimes think about that truck. That off-key melody that showed up when the heat was just right, and the sky just blue enough, and the neighborhood just still enough to make it ring like a bell in a chapel. It didn't tell time, it was time. The good kind. The golden kind. The kind that didn't measure hours but memories. Because back then, you didn't need a watch to know what time it was. You just needed to listen. We always said it was about the ice cream. That's what we told our parents when we came home with chocolate on our cheeks and sticky fingers. That's what we shouted to each other as we ran, "The truck's coming, I'm getting a rocket pop." But the truth is, even then, somewhere deep down, we knew. It wasn't just about the ice cream. Not really. Because the thing is, the ice cream itself was always gone too fast. A few bites, a few licks, and it was over. It melted before you even got back to the porch. It dripped onto your wrist and stained your shirt. It was temporary, fleeting. Sweet, yes, but not what stayed with you. What stayed was the feeling, the whole moment, the anticipation, the chase. The neighborhood gathered at the curb, the soft whir of the truck's generator, the breeze shifting as the sun began to lower behind the rooftops. That's what lingered. When the truck came, it didn't just bring dessert. It brought a pause, a break in the day where everything else, chores, arguments, boredom, scraped knees, faded into the background. For a brief golden window of time, nothing else mattered. You didn't think about who had more toys or whose bike had a cooler horn. You didn't worry about the spelling test tomorrow or the weird look your big brother gave you at lunch. You were just there, fully entirely present, standing in line, holding your coins, smiling for no reason other than the sun was warm and the music was playing, and there was something cold coming your way. It gave us something to look forward to. And when you're a kid, especially in a world without screens and endless distractions, that meant everything. The ice cream truck was a daily dose of hope. Even if the day had gone sideways, even if your mom was in a mood, or your team lost the game, or your best friend didn't want to play, That tune would come rolling in, and suddenly the world seemed fixable. Some days it was the best thing that happened. Some days it was the only good thing that happened. And it connected us, not just to each other, but to the world outside our houses. Kids who never said a word to one another in school stood side by side in that line. Brothers who'd just fought over the last can of root beer shared a napkin to wipe a melting treat. Grown-ups, even if they didn't come to buy anything, would peek out the window, smile at the familiar tune, maybe mutter something about inflation, or when I was a kid. But still they noticed. The truck pulled us out of ourselves and into the shared moment. It reminded us that we were all living the same summer, under the same sky. And maybe that was the real magic. Not the sugar, not the novelty, but the ritual. The dependable, gentle ritual of something showing up every day without fail, offering a tiny escape, a reset, a breath. In a world that often felt too big or too complicated for our little kid brains to handle, the truck was something that made sense. It had wheels. It played music. It gave you something cold and sweet and satisfying. That was enough. Even the way we talked about it wasn't really about the ice cream. We'd say things like, "Remember that one time the truck broke down and he still handed out popsicles from a cooler in the back?" Or remember when your little brother dropped his cone and the ice cream guy gave him a new one for free? Those were acts, not flavors. They weren't about taste. They were about kindness, about being seen, about the little ways the world surprised you with grace. And of course it was also about the stories, because every good summer needs a story, and the truck gave us plenty. Like the time someone tried to ride their bike and eat a popsicle at the same time and crashed into the Patterson's rose bushes. Or when Joey dared Sally to lick the entire bottom of her Choco Taco in one go, and she nearly choked from laughing. Or the day it was so hot, the gumball eyes on the character bars slid halfway down their faces, and we all declared it the meltdown apocalypse. You didn't just eat ice cream, you experienced it, together. And when the summer wound down, when the days got shorter, and the nights cooler, and the first yellow leaves appeared on the sidewalk, we knew the truck would stop coming soon. That realization always hit quietly. No big announcement, no farewell tour. Just one afternoon you'd be sitting outside listening, and the jingle never came. Maybe it was raining. Maybe school had already started. Maybe the driver just knew it was time. But either way, the absence was sharp, like a light turning off, like a song ending before the last note. And yet even then it wasn't sad. Not exactly, because you knew it would return. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but next year. When the air got warm again and the grass turned soft underfoot, and the trees filled in with that deep summer green, you'd hear it again. That same off-key tune, and you'd run, because it was never just about the ice cream. It was about knowing, even in a world that shifted and changed and sometimes hurt, that something could still show up, bright, familiar, full of joy. A little reminder that even just for a moment, life could be simple again. Some days it felt like the truck could read our minds, not just when we were craving something sweet or when the sun made the sidewalk too hot to walk barefoot, but on those days, the hard ones, the ones where nothing seemed to go right, when your best friend suddenly stopped talking to you for reasons you couldn't understand, when your bike chain broke and you missed the neighborhood race, when your parents were fighting and you sat on the porch pretending not to hear. Those were the days the truck showed up, right on time, as if it had been circling the block, waiting for the exact moment the neighborhood needed something good. It didn't ask questions. It didn't need to. It rolled in humming that same cheerful tune, and somehow made everything feel a little less heavy. And even if nothing really changed, your friend's still mad, your bike still broken, your home still tense, the world didn't seem quite so mean. Because someone still showed up. Someone still handed you a fudgesicle with a quiet nod, no explanation needed. And that moment, brief, cold, sweet, was enough to remind you that joy hadn't forgotten your name. And it wasn't just us kids. Grown-ups felt it too, even if they never said so. You'd see them glance up from their lawns or their porches when that tune rolled in. They didn't run to the curb like we did, but they'd smile, or sigh, or lean back in their chairs like a memory had just pulled into the driveway. Some of them probably remembered their own ice cream trucks from another time, another street. Maybe their own kids had grown up and moved away, and that jingle brought them back to when life was a little louder, a little stickier, and full of footprints across the grass. Sometimes on those harder days we'd gather at the truck, not just for the ice cream, but for each other. No one had to say what was wrong. We didn't talk about feelings, at least not directly. But we showed up, together. Maybe one kid handed another a coin because they didn't have any. Maybe someone gave up their spot in line just because. Maybe the driver tossed in an extra napkin or gave a kid their treat for free just this once. There was kindness there. Small, silent, steady kindness. And when you're little, those gestures mean the world. When you're older, you realize they still do. There was one summer, maybe you remember a summer like this too, when it felt like the whole world was off balance. A neighbor moved away. Another got sick. Someone's dog died, and it felt like the whole street went quiet for a while. We didn't know how to talk about those things, not really. But when the truck came that day, slower than usual, music just a bit softer, we lined up just the same. A little quieter, a little closer together. It wasn't celebration that time, it was comfort. And somehow even that same melting rocket pop tasted different. Like it knew. You see, the ice cream truck wasn't just about good days. It wasn't just sunshine and laughter and sprinkler water in your shoes. It was steady, reliable, predictable in a way that most of life, especially for a child, wasn't. You couldn't control school or family or friends, but the truck, it came. Same time, same tune, same man with his quiet smile and sun-leathered hands. And when the rest of the world felt shaky, that kind of constancy was a lifeline. Even the sound of the truck on tough days was different. It cut through the air like hope. It wasn't background noise anymore, it was a signal. That tune echoed through the block, like someone lighting a match in a dark room. You could be inside, sulking arms crossed in bed after a bad morning, and the moment you heard that music, something inside you softened. Not everything was fixed, no, but maybe something small was soothed, just enough to try again. And on rare, truly magical days, the truck would come early. Not when expected, not at the usual hour. It would surprise us just after lunch, or in the middle of a lazy afternoon when we were all too tired to run. And suddenly the neighborhood would erupt in motion again. Those surprise visits were like little gifts from the universe, as if the driver had sensed the lull, the boredom, the need, and answered it. No invitation required. There was something sacred about the way we gathered on those days. Not in church clothes or polished shoes. Just kids in dirt-streaked t-shirts and grass-stained knees. No agenda, no event, no one taking pictures. Just a truck-a-line and a moment of together. And isn't that what we crave, even now? In a world of so much distance, so many screens and schedules, we miss that kind of spontaneous gathering. That effortless community built on nothing but a shared craving and a familiar song. Then there were the end-of-summer visits, the ones where we knew it might be the last time for a while. You could feel it in the air. The light changed. The crickets got louder. The grown-ups started saying things like back-to-school shopping and early bedtime, and even though you tried not to think about it, a part of you knew this might be it. One more treat. One more run barefoot across the lawn. One more chance to taste summer before it turned into something else. And the truck came. Not flashy, not with a farewell. Just came, as always, as if to say, here. Take this moment. Remember it. And we did. We always did. Even now, when I hear a distant jingle on a warm afternoon, maybe from a truck in another town, maybe just in my mind, I stop. I listen. For a second, the years fall away. I'm a kid again. Knees dirty, face flushed, coins sweating in my palm. I'm surrounded by neighbors I knew like cousins, by bikes, dropped in the grass, by the quiet hum of something dependable, something right. Because it wasn't just about the ice cream. It was about the timing, about the way that truck knew again and again exactly when to come. Not just when the day was hot, but when we needed it most. No one said it out loud. No one ever does. There was no grand announcement, no farewell parade, no thanks for the memories painted on the back of the truck. One summer it just didn't show up. The jingle didn't echo down the block at its usual hour. No kids dropped their bikes and took off running. No dogs barked. No screen doors slammed open with coins rattling in a fist. The truck simply didn't come. At first we thought it was a fluke. Maybe it had a flat tire. Maybe the driver took a day off, or maybe it was too hot even for him. We waited. Sat on the curb longer than usual. Looked up every time a van passed, listening for that familiar tune. But the silence stretched and stretched, and eventually, it settled in. And that's the thing about childhood ending. It never happens all at once. It happens in quiet ways, in little gaps that get longer, in rituals that start to fade before you realize they're gone. The truck not coming wasn't just the absence of dessert. It was the beginning of a world that moved on without warning. A world where you didn't run barefoot every day, where your best friend got a job at the gas station, where someone else's house sat dark because their family moved away. It wasn't like we didn't have ice cream anymore. Freezers got bigger. Stores had whole aisles of treats in perfectly printed boxes. You could even microwave your fudge sauce or swirl your own whipped cream. But somehow it all tasted a little hollow, a little too easy, a little too quiet, because it wasn't about the sugar. It was about the chase, the sound, the line of kids and the squeak of the brakes and the soft thud of the freezer door inside that truck. We tried not to talk about it. We grew taller, got more responsibilities, more distractions. Summer didn't feel endless anymore. It felt short-scheduled already, halfway over by the time school let out. Some of us got part-time jobs. Others took summer classes or left town altogether. The days blurred, not with laughter and heat and games, but with clocks and calendars and things to get done. But still, there were moments, quiet ones. You'd be walking home from somewhere, maybe after dark, maybe carrying groceries or a textbook, or just the weight of the day, and you'd think you heard it. The jingle, faint, way off in the distance. You'd pause, look up, wait, but it wasn't there. Just a song in your head, just the wind. But for a second, you were back. Knees scraped, shirt damp, palms sticky, and everything felt possible again. Some kids probably never noticed the last time the truck came. They were busy doing other things, watching TV, learning to drive, falling in love. They didn't realize that a piece of their childhood had packed up and rolled away one day, never to return. And that's okay. We all grieve things in our own time. Some of us only miss things once they're already memories. But some of us, maybe you, maybe me, stood outside a little too long that first silent afternoon. We knew. We felt it in the stillness, in the way the air hung heavier than usual, in the absence of that melody that had always been part of the season's rhythm. Something had shifted, the music had stopped, and eventually people moved on. The old man on the corner passed away. The swing set in the Wellington's yard rusted and collapsed. The cracked sidewalk was repaved, smoothed over, erasing the chalk drawings that used to live there. The neighborhood grew quieter, more adult, more careful, but in our heads and in the deepest parts of our hearts, the truck still exists. It still rolls around the corner of a long-lost summer evening. It still plays that same jingle, warped slightly with time, but unmistakable. It still gathers the kids, our younger selves, out into the street, laughing and barefoot and wide-eyed. We're still there, somewhere, and maybe that's what memory is for, to let us visit, just for a little while. Because though the truck may have stopped coming, though the music has long since faded into the past, the feeling it brought of being known, of being young, of being exactly where you were supposed to be, that never leaves you. Not really. It just rides with you, quietly, in the back of your mind, waiting for a warm day, a still afternoon, a soft breeze, and maybe the right kind of silence, the kind that almost sounds like a song. I remember years later hearing a faint melody while driving through a neighborhood I didn't know. I had the windows rolled down. The air smelled like cut grass and charcoal, and for a split second I was 12 again. My hands left the steering wheel. My eyes scanned the sidewalks. Not for stop signs, but for kids, for bikes, for chalk on the pavement. The truck turned the corner behind me. Same boxy shape, same painted menu, same song. I pulled over, watched a small crowd of kids run toward it, like a scene I'd lived 100 times before. I didn't get out, didn't buy anything, but I watched, and something in my chest relaxed. The world wasn't lost. Not completely. The song still played. Somewhere. And maybe that's all we ever really need. Not to go back. Not to undo time. But just to know that the joy we once had, the kind that came without effort, without planning, without even a reason, still exists. That it lives on. Not just in memory, but in real trucks, on real streets, for real kids who still know how to chase something, just because it sings. You think it's gone. You really do. The years pile on, and suddenly you're not that barefoot kid anymore. You're driving the car now, paying the bills, fixing the fence instead of hopping over it. The summers feel different, shorter, hotter, somehow less free. You catch yourself saying things like, "It wasn't this warm when I was a kid," or "They don't make things like they used to," and you laugh because you sound like your dad, or your granddad, and that used to annoy you. But now, it feels like home. And then one day you hear it, that jingle, faint, almost drowned out by the noise of lawnmowers and leaf blowers and traffic and time. But it's there, somewhere on the edge of the neighborhood, and your body reacts before your brain does. You pause, you turn your head, you listen, and for a moment you forget what you were doing. You forget the to-do list, the groceries in the trunk, the email you meant to send, because your body remembers something older than all of that, something simpler, something pure. Maybe you follow the sound, maybe you don't. Maybe you just stand there in your front yard, one hand shielding your eyes from the sun, squinting down the street. And maybe, just maybe, you see it. The truck. Not the same one, no, but close enough. Same shape, same colors, same sliding window now with brighter stickers. Maybe the driver looks different, younger, but you smile anyway, because the song is the same. And then something wild happens. You see your own kid, your daughter, your son, your niece or nephew take off running, just like you used to. Their shoes fly off, their arms pump at their sides. You hear them shout to a friend across the lawn, ice cream truck, with that wide-eyed, full-chested urgency that only a child can summon. And suddenly the whole scene unfolds again. The past, looping into the present, new kids, same magic, and your heart. It cracks open a little. You walk over, slowly, no rush. You've learned that part of the joy is in the slowness, the watching. You stand to the side as they scan the menu, arguing over which flavor is best, marveling at how much things cost now. You hear them laugh, point drop their change, pick it back up. You see the driver smile the same way you remember from years ago. And as your kid steps forward to order, you reach into your pocket and hand them $1. Just like someone once did for you. They don't notice the way your hand lingers, the way you look at that truck, like it's an old friend. They don't know that for a moment you're seeing two scenes at once, this one and another from long ago. A younger version of yourself, shirt half untucked, cheeks, flushed coins clutched in your palm, standing at that same kind of window. And you realize something beautiful. The truck never really left. Sure, that truck did. That driver retired. That version of summer grew up and faded like Polaroids left in the sun. But the spirit of it, the ritual, the sound, the meaning, it stayed. It slipped into your bones, into your breath, into the shape of who you became. It shows up in how you slow down on a summer evening, in how you hum without realizing it, in how you teach your kids to run when they hear the music, not because they'll miss the treat, but because some things are worth chasing. The truck comes back in other ways, too, in a smell, sunscreen mixed with grass, in a sound, the creak of a screen door, in a feeling, the way time bends during a golden hour, and everything feels softer, more possible. Sometimes it comes back in a dream or in a story you're telling at a cookout, or in the way your hand moves when you unwrap a popsicle for your kid and then catch yourself licking the wrapper just like you used to. And then there are the photos, old ones yellowing at the edges, pulled from a shoebox you forgot was under the bed. There you are, 8 years old, standing next to the truck eyes, squinting, mouth open wide, around a popsicle, a stain on your shirt, and pride on your face. No caption needed. The moment says it all. You hold the picture closer, trying to remember what flavor it was. Was it grape? Was it cherry? But it doesn't matter, because what you remember most isn't the taste, it's the feeling. It returns because we carry it. We became it. That part of childhood, that brief, sweet, sacred window, when the world was made of songs on wheels and cold treats on hot days, it got folded into us, pressed into the corners of who we are. And now, whether we mean to or not, we pass it on. And maybe one day, far down the road, your kid will be standing in their own front yard, grown now, holding a lawn hose or a rake or a baby of their own. And they'll hear it, that music, and they'll pause, and they'll remember, and they'll say, maybe out loud, maybe just in their heart, I remember this, and maybe they'll cry, or maybe they'll laugh, or maybe they'll do nothing at all but listen, because sometimes the best kind of coming back is quiet, not with fireworks, but with a melody that never quite left, a feeling that never asked for permission to stay, a truck that somehow against time and noise and distance still knows exactly when to come.